With MailChimp, you get more than a URL. You get an all-in-one marketing platform to help drive sales, with things like data-driven recommendations and powerful automation tools. Get started today at MailChimp.com/smartmarketing. MailChimp, built for growing businesses.
Write Night is a talk show with published authors, writers, and content creators discussing both the creative and technical sides of writing, as well as the industry surrounding it, from novels to screenplays to comics and more. And now, here's your host, author Travis I. Sivart.
And welcome to Write Night. I am Travis I. Sivart. Tonight we're going to talk about plots, plods, and plotting. We'll get into that in a few minutes. I want to let you guys know, what do I want to let them know? Oh, what I really want to let them know is I'm drinking Writer's Tears Irish whiskey tonight. I promised in a previous episode not too long ago that I'm going to be trying to drink this over a couple of weeks worth of episodes, and so far I haven't drank the whole bottle since the last episode, so I still have some left. Other than you guys can find my work. I have done multiple series. I have done steampunk, and I'm most recently working on something called cyberpulp, which is cyberpunk in the old pulp style writing. So it's got a touch of noir and a touch of that just Indiana Jones type adventure to it. Other than that, let's introduce the incredible people that we get to hang out with tonight. And while they tell you guys who they are, drop it right there in chat for everybody who is here in the live chat, what you're reading, writing, or creating. Tara, can we start with you?
Hey, I'm Tara Moeller, and I'm Dreamer-in-Chief at Dreampunk Press. I'm also an author under my own name and under the pen name E.G. Gaddis. You can check out the latest from E.G. Gaddis, The Mechanics of Life, which is a steampunk romance, mystery, gothic kind of mess. But, you can read the first chapters at www.dreampunkpress.com. Robert?
And hey, I am Robert Turk. I am an award-winning author and game designer. My website is wicked-clever.com. My most recent novel was Persnickety Jones and the Pirates of Undertow. And my project that I'm working on right now is a role-playing game called Gablonia.
Very good. By the way, there are rewards out for me also, just so you know. You're not the only one. Now, let's see. It looks like a couple people are working on different things. Love those writing projects, guys. And just so everybody knows what we're talking about, we record this live on my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk. That is twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk. And we record this about, well, whenever we need to. And we have a live interactive chat audience who, for the chat audience, we're not going to read each and every comment, just the ones that are most relevant and or amusing. And if anybody hears this sound, it means I want to interrupt you so I can read some of those comments, though I'll probably just read them off when, there's a natural space for it. For anybody listening via podcast, you guys need to come hang out with us live because we are going to be interacting with the audience. So this is very much like if you've ever been to a convention and you've been at a panel where people can ask questions. We got that going on every single podcast. Okay. So tonight's topic is plots, and believe it or not, Robert, Tara, and I have been going back and forth for the past, 8-9 hours on how to plot the title of this episode, and we've decided to just put it off till the end of the episode when we see what we're going to talk about. So we have some gems here, and I think we want to start out, and we're just going to go around the table on this one, of first and foremost. And most people are going to be like, duh, I know that. But do you really? What is a plot when it comes to writing in a book or other things? Tara, why don't you start and then pass it over to Robert, and then I get to throw some words in at the end if there's any left.
The definition that I like to use for the plot is the series of events that start at the beginning of the book and continue through till the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Robert?
I would change one word in that definition, and only one word. I would say the series of events that start at the beginning of the story and go to the end of the story. Because I don't know that you really have a plot of some books. You don't need them, technical manuals and things like that. But in fiction writing, plot is super important.
Okay, and it's my turn. That's awesome. I almost have the dictionary definition pulled up, and now I have it because you guys used all the good words. A secret plan or scheme to accomplish some purpose, especially a hostile, unlawful, or evil purpose. Definition number 2, also called storyline, the plan, scheme, or main story of a literary or dramatic work as a play, novel, or short story. So basically, it's the stuff going down around your characters.
And just since we brought up storyline real quick, technical manuals and technical books have storylines. As a technical editor, I'm telling you.
I agree with you.
Is it a plot? Maybe not, but there will be a storyline.
Yeah.
It's true. And what she means by that, folks, is you want a certain feel, mood, and flow to every single book. If you don't have that, it becomes so dry and unreadable. But to create this rhythm and this personality behind the writing, whether it's professional and stodgy or whether it's kind of fun and loose, depending what kind of nonfiction you're writing. If you go look at Steampunk for Simpletons that I did, this has a very interactive, chatty feel when you're reading it. And the same for other nonfictions. Biography is nonfiction, definitely has a story to it, definitely has that ebb and flow, and so on. So,
and it has a plot.
It does. It doesn't have one.
Biography should have a plot,
but it doesn't have one plot.
I would say it has a storyline.
Yeah. Right. Okay, and
not necessarily a plot.
This ties into a question one of the chatters asked: is can a story have more than one plot? Which with a biography, oh yeah. And yes, absolutely, Tara. I see Tara's shaking her head. By the way, guys, keep in mind, it's a podcast recording. Dropping the single word in there is helpful. Yes. Matter of fact, most stories should have more than one plot. There's called an A plot and a B plot. And B plot is generally your romance or your character's personal arc above and beyond the storyline. Go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, I mean, there's such things as subplots.
Right. I would say a story has one plot, but it can have multiple storylines. Because the plot is, again, it's a series of events that start at the beginning and finish to the end. And those different storylines interact with the plot.
So are we splitting hairs and definitions and actually saying the same thing while differing over words?
Absolutely.
I'm not a lumper. I'm a splitter. So to me, plot and storyline are two slightly different
I would have flipped them. And what you're calling a storyline, I'd call a plot. And what you're calling a plot, I'd call a storyline. So, yeah, I think we're all agreeing here, just using different terminology.
And really, you're never going to find people that agree 100%.
No.
Not in our industry on what it is.
Yeah. So. Well, in real life also, I think it makes life a lot more interesting that we can dicker over the details and still high five at the end of the conversation. By the way, on hands, not my face this time, okay, Tara?
I will say, if you are in a college English class and they're asked the question, you write whatever the professor wrote on the. Don't come with our answers. Don't make something up. Write what the professor wrote on the board.
That is
at
correct.
The podcast, we will argue.
And my interpretation is probably colored by the fact that
you're Canadian.
Where I work during the day on these technical books, reports, we have what is called a storyline, and it is not a plot.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably, for me,
That could definitely help
why I
shape how
make-
you, yeah.
call a plot a series of events from start to, because it's plotted, it's planned, and then there's a storyline. That's probably because at work we have storylines, and I do not consider those plots.
Actually, that's a really good...
We have a plot and a storyline, so.
That's a really good clarification. Looking again at the word plot, and maybe not the technical definition I read off, but if you have a plot, you have plotted it, as in outlined, as in structured, as in created. So, now again, we can go into the artistic side of that and dicker, but yeah, I can definitely see where Tara's coming from on this. But now I want to shift us. By the way, that's cute, Andrea. And Andrea has a couple more questions, which I'm going to bounce over and come back to, because pre-show, we discussed, well, actually, Robert asked, do we want to talk about how we plot? And then as we discussed it over the next 90 seconds, the word, the process, what is our process to plot? So we each have very different ways of going about this. Matter of fact, I would even say, depending on what kind of book we're writing, we change our own way of doing it. It's not always the same. So I want to give you guys a chance, and when you're done talking, unless somebody interrupts you first, pass it to somebody else. Just poke them and make them talk. And don't forget to include me in case I have any thoughts in this big old rattly head of mine. So
Tara and I can go head to head all night.
Yeah, you know what? That's called a date night. You take it off the podcast, mister.
So Travis brought up, I think he brought up the word outline. And I will preface this by saying that I am not usually an outliner. I actually hate outlines for my creative work because I feel it stifles the story in my head. Now, if I am writing a role-playing game adventure, which I do freelance for other people, absolutely 100%, I have to write an outline. I have to know the series of events, and it makes my job so much easier by having that. I write the outline, I get it approved by my boss, and then I fill in the spaces between that outline and flesh it all out. But when I'm writing a fiction story for myself, I tend to brainstorm, and I constantly brainstorm instead of outlining. So when I'm writing a story, I'll start with a kernel of an idea, and I'll let it simmer there, and I'll start think, okay, what happens next? And this is what I teach kids when I go and do school visits. It's what happens next. That's how you keep your story going. You've got the events, you've got your characters. Sure, given all this, what happens next? And that's how I like to write fiction. Now, I have Post-it notes. I'm waving my hands in the air for those of you that can't see, all over my workspace. Because when I come up with an idea, or I think of something and I was like, oh, I need that back 20 pages before, I don't go add it into the story at that point. I write from the start of the story to the end of the story. I slap it on a Post-it note if I'm not to it, and I put it up on my wall so I don't forget it. Or if I'm not sitting at my desk physically writing when I come up with an idea, I add it to my brainstorming Google Doc so that my Google Doc is always changing. And it eventually becomes sort of like an outline because there's points that I want to hit on it, but they might not be in order. And it's certainly not a very detailed chapter 1. This happens. Chapter 2. This happens. ... And some authors are very much outliners. And I will go to writing conferences and conventions where that's a huge debate. That's like the biggest panel. And they call it, are you a pantser, meaning you write by the seat of your pants, which is evidently what I do, or are you a plotter, where you outline everything out and fill in the blanks? I am definitely a by the seat of my pants. I want to see how the story unfolds naturally. Tara?
So I consider myself a pantser as well, because I am not a super plotter. And the only story I ever did anything that I would consider true outlining on is a mystery. And I'm sure Travis knows what I'm referencing. It's not published yet. It's going to be published, but it's not yet. And that's because if you are writing something like a mystery where you have to have clues that have to make sense and they have to build to, you have to outline those. You have to know exactly what that clue is. You have to know exactly how it fits into the resolution of the mystery and who's involved in it.
Yeah.
But that is about the only outlining I did with that. Because what I usually do is kind of similar, I think, to what Robert mentioned, but a little different. I write chapter summaries and then fill in the blanks.
Interesting.
Not always, but a lot of the times, because I know what I want to do. I know kind of where it starts in my head, and I summarize and I go through explaining what has to happen, because I need to make sure that if I have a character in there who's a side character, they need to show up more than once if they have a name. And if you're writing a series, you need to have some information about them. I'll have whole freaking character backgrounds written for a character, for my side characters, because if they show up again, I need to know who they are, how they fit into things. But I tend to, like I said, I write chapter summaries that explain what the gist of what's happening and why. And I will do this all the way through to my end chapter, because if I don't have enough chapter summaries, I can't. I don't have enough yet. Now, sometimes I'll just start writing first, and I'll get 3 chapters written before I start doing my summaries, because I haven't gelled enough of the story together yet, and sometimes it just never gets finished. Travis.
So, quick question about your process there. If you say you're doing chapter summaries, once you start to do them, do you do chapter summaries for the whole book and then go write the book? Or do you write 1 or 2, write those chapters, write 1 or 2 more, write those chapters, etc.?
Usually, like I said, sometimes I'll write the first 2 full chapters before I get into writing summaries, but then I have chapter summaries right up till the end.
You're a plotter and you don't even know it.
I have talked to plotters and they call me pantser. So
well, I'll talk more about that when it's my turn.
Because I've talked to a couple of folks who call themselves plotters. And they plot to the freaking scenes in their chapters. I do not plot to scenes. I have the gist of what's going to happen in this chapter and the character that drives it and what characters need to be there. And that's it. I mean, it's like maybe 50 words per chapter when I get to that point. Then I have a tendency to write the last 2 chapters fully. Then I have to go back and write the middle. And sometimes, and this is why I'm a pantser, because I'll go, you know what, did that work? And I'll just omit a chapter, or I'll add 3 more. So this is why a plotter will say, I'm not a plotter, I'm a pantser. Because when you have someone who is truly plotting, they're taking the beat sheet, which is, you know, the breakup of a book, and when you have to hit the first
let's each get a chance,
major.
Tara. Let's each get a chance to talk about our own process before we talk about other people who aren't even in the room.
Okay. I'll shut up.
Well, you could finish. Okay, you're good. You ready to pass it on?
Actually, can I interject?
Yeah.
Andrea asked, do I use beat sheets even if I don't outline it? I honestly don't know what a beat sheet is.
I'm going to go into that.
Okay.
I'm going to go into all that because a lot of what I'm going to talk about bounces off what you both said, because you both covered points that I'd want to cover.
Sure.
So By the way, Robert, interesting fact, going back to yours, you're like, I outline a role-playing game adventure, but not my creative. To me, a lot of my novels, in my head, they're a live role-playing game for my characters.
Sure. And
so in that sense, and this is where I come in, the reason I recommend outline is pacing. This is something I didn't learn until after my first or second book. Pacing is part of human psychology. If you pace a movie, and I'm going to movies right now, you pace a movie wrong, you could take a good movie and fail. Or you could take a bad movie and succeed with good pacing. And if you take something like Indiana Jones, don't hang me for this, not a great movie, folks, but the pacing is spot on. You get what you want when you want it. Bang, bang, bang. Delicious. Love it. But you can get a movie that's maybe just as good. John Carter. The pacing is off. And it falls short. So, this is the reason when I outline them, by the way, I put myself in that hybrid between the two places of pantser versus plotter. And by the way, those plotters you were talking about, Tara, to comment on it, that's called OCD. Except they call it CDO, which is OCD in alphabetical order, the way it should be. And hold on, let me put some bullet points and sub things in there. So, Tara, the way you write a murder mystery, I wanted to talk about that because in the latest Silver and Smith, it feels like a mystery as I'm doing the edit. But I didn't plot where those things go. Now, once I'm editing, I'm deciding, I've missed this point. I need to make sure I pop that in the right place. Yeah. There was one thing I put in at the pinch point, or right before the pinch point. It's that burst of information at the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2. And I'm like, that might be too soon. But I did a mystery type thing without plotting. And by the way, we also mentioned side characters, and if you're going to have a side character, mention more than one. Yes, write your side characters down in your notes or whatever separate thing, because nothing's more annoying than hitting F7 to pull up a side character, see what color their hair was, and then not remembering their damn name. You're like, it was Dave something, maybe, I don't know. So my process is I'm somewhere in between, and I have used beat sheets. Beat sheets don't have to be that OCD. That is your pacing. It can be more of a guideline. I like to think of the way I plot like a dot to dot. We all loved them as kids. You have certain points to make the full picture. What happens between that, if you're drawing a puppy, you can do jagged lines to make the fur. You could do straight to make it a hairless puppy that got shaved on one side. Why would you do that to a dog? But anyhow, plotting, as in planning, is important for the pacing. And pacing is essential to human psychology, so things happen in a certain order. And I don't mean the story happens, just the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And then the pinch points in those two places, and the midpoint. And if you don't know what all this means, don't worry about it. For those of you that do, this is what I missed in my first book, my first full-length novel. The pacing is way off. It's all in there. It's just not set right. And it's something that wasn't even on my radar. So I hear both of you saying very different things, but it still comes down to, because Robert, there's a little bit of planning in yours. Your whole, I'm brainstorming, etc. Do you go back and structure again later for the pacing?
I do. I was going to hit on that when it came back to me. My process is I write from the beginning to the end as fast as I can. I want the story out of my head. Okay. It might not be the right number of words. It might not be chapters, but I've got all the major points, all the major characters the first time through. Okay. Then I go back and I edit.
At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, you can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more. At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, you can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more.
And then I go back and I edit. So I will have read a story that I write out loud because I write out loud. I want to know how the language sounds when I'm writing it. I will have read it probably 20, 30 times before I publish it. So it's a constant revision. But I get to the end, I get it laid out story-wise, and then I go back and I clean up. And if something's missing or if there was an idea that I didn't hit, I put it in there.
Okay, so you're building your pacing in on the second draft forward.
Sure.
Is what I'm hearing. Here's something I'll tell. A lot of writers are like, oh, God, editing. Oh, just shoot me. What Robert just said there is another way of paraphrasing my thoughts on editing, because I used to suffer through it too. Now, the biggest comparison I make is the first time you write your book. I live in Virginia. Let's say I'm going to Disney World. Okay, I'm driving to Disney World. So I want to stop at south of the border. I want to stop at St. Augustine, Fountain of Youth, and then hit Disney World. Disney World's a climax, the third act. The first act is just getting on the road. Act 2, which is your middle 50%, is everything else. So I mentioned some, gas stations or whatever, and I write my book, write my trip, get to Disney World, have fun. When I edit, that's the second time I'm making that same road trip. And this is where Robert was talking about fleshing things out. This is where I can check out J&R Cigars because I like cigars and it's on the way. I can stop at that mom and pop road stand that's a vegetable and a Mexican grill all in the same building. I can stop at that other place just outside of Atlanta that somebody... and so on. You flesh it out. You add those details. You add those second characters, those B plots, whatever. But you get to enjoy the trip a whole nother time for a different reason. You've got your big points in there, and you're going to clean those up. But now you get to flesh it out and put more meat on that skeleton before you finally skin it with the cover and the font.
Which is another episode.
Kind of creep myself out with that. Like reverse dissection here.
I'm going to throw in a quick clarification before we toss it to Tara. I said that I write a story from the beginning to the end. That's not always true. I will often write the first 2 chapters of a story to see if there's a story worth telling there. I have a lot of 2 chapters that will never go any further because that spark that I had at the beginning petered out 2 chapters in. And I'm like, where are we going from here? I don't know. Put it aside. If it comes to me again, I'll write it. And it almost never comes to me again. It's not a story I want to spend my time on.
No,
so
I want to say one more thing, or one more series of things before we pass it back to Tara, and she is rocking and jiggling her chair. She is ready to talk. Tara, you mentioned you write these chapter summaries. I do something very similar. Even when I use a full beat sheet, which, by the way, I almost never write or even plot or outline my third act till I write that far, because I want to leave room and flexibility in everything I write, because sometimes those characters do go like, we'll be over here because we found something shiny. And I want to be able to flex with that and still reach those points of that dot to dot. But what I'll often do, beat sheet or not, I have what I want to cover in this chapter. And usually it's 1 or 2 sentences. Sometimes it's a full paragraph. Other times it's bullet points, especially if it's an action scene or more action-oriented chapter. Then it's bullet points. But Tara, I do the same thing. And yeah, this is why I think it's... We'll repeat this at the end. The bottom line is, as long as you write your book, doesn't matter how you do it.
Yep.
But for me, the hybrid there, and yeah, I don't think you're a total pantser, Tara. I think you've got a bit of
Oh,
structure
I know
to your
I'm not
build.
a sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I have written books pantsing, started and just wrote it and got to the end. And for me, when I do that, I hit it all day long. I hate editing my own stuff when I go back. And when I do that, there's too much stuff in the middle to fix. So, which is what eventually evolved into this writing the first 2 or 3 chapters fully. Again, like Robert, I've got a bunch that stalled at the end of chapter 2 and I went, there's nothing else here. And then I do these chapter summaries to get kind of the first draft on paper. And it's very brief, but by that time, I know the characters, I know who's in it. Because if you're introducing big major characters after the 3rd chapter, you got something else going on. And then I get to like the last 2 chapters and I write the end. And then I go through and I'll write like some of the beginning more, in towards the middle. And it's like, I kind of write from the beginning to the middle and from the end to the middle sometimes, which is, again, it's how I do it. And then I kind of meet in the middle and I'm done. And just something to bring up is, Robert had said that he ends up reading his about 30 times because he edits. I edit as I go. And I think part of the reason I wind up doing that is because I'm editing other folks' work at the same time. And in order for me to write, there are times when if I am editing someone else's work on a deadline, I'm not writing my own stuff. I just don't have the time. And so I end up starting from the beginning and writing and going, that doesn't work. What was this? This is crap. And editing and rewriting as I go. And I know there are folks like, oh no, you can't do it that way. You got to just write to the end. For your first book that you're going to write, yes. Start, get it finished.
Yeah.
However you do that. And you will eventually,
there's a huge
book, figure out the way you do it.
There's a huge difference between using editing as you go as an excuse to not continue writing versus cleaning up and actually writing the book.
And getting yourself familiar with your story again.
Right.
There's nothing worse than being away for it so long and you go to pick up where you left off and go, where was I? Which is why I have those lovely little summaries, because that helps me get back in. Because sometimes I'll read, one chapter summary and then the next chapter summary, then the next chapter summary and go, okay, I've placed myself back in my story, and then I go back and then I can write.
Okay. And in a moment, I'm going to, Robert, if you had something to say, I'll give you a chance in 1 second. If you're good, we'll move forward. But I want to move us back to the actual plot thing. But Andrea and Trin both asked a very similar question. Andrea saying, Tara, as an editor, do you have an editor? And Trin says, who edits your stories? Asking you two in particular, because most people here know Tara is my editor.
Right.
So, Robert, let's start with you, because I think Tara's might go longer. Who edits your stories?
So I change editors depending on what I'm working. My role-playing game editor is a gentleman named Keith Garrett. He's an amazing role-playing editor. He works for some of the big names, but he still makes time for me, and that is awesome. But that's a different kind of editing.
Right.
There's still a story in what I'm writing.
But it's still a technical editor at the same time.
It's got that technical editing too. So he has to be skilled in multiple aspects. My editor for my last book, Persnickety Jones and the Pirates of Undertow, was a librarian who does freelance editing on the side. And he turned out to be a really solid editor. I took a chance on him because he was enthusiastic about my work and wanted to do it. And I took a chance because he didn't want to charge me very much. And I was like, if I got to have another editor go over it, I'll have another editor go over it. But I lucked out. He turned out to be a very good editor.
Cool. Tara?
So,
By the way, spoilers, there's other episodes where she mentions this.
So I have Cynthia Shep is a lovely editor, and she has edited some of my stuff when I can get on her schedule. And again, that just kind of shows you how good an editor she is, that you have to like get in on her schedule. And when I can, I have used other editors.
You can't see her expression
is
right
that
now, but it's priceless.
So Cynthia is an editor. Okay. If you do a search, Cynthia, CYNTHIA Shep, SHEPP, or her website should come up. And she has different types of editing that she will do for you. If you go to an editor and it's just one kind of edit that they offer.
It's not a show about editing.
Yeah.
We can cover that on another show, but I want to bring us back to plot at this point in time. They were just curious if you used an editor. And sorry to cut you off because it's interesting and it's good advice, but let's stick to what we got on our table right now. That's enough to eat without ordering editor dessert. Editor aperitifs? I don't know. Editor something. So what I'm looking at here, and I want to bring us back to actual plot, and this is, again, one of those shows where we're like, we have 9 more minutes, and I have a 4-minute outro to go through. So this is normally when we... What's that?
We still got so much we can cover.
I know. We always do. So what I'm saying, normally I'd be like, let's give our closing thoughts and wrap up. But, we're not going to do that at this point. We're going to go on a little bit more. So I want to talk about what makes a good plot, guys. And I'm going to answer mine first and then pass it around to you guys. And this may be, people say, the plot thickens. What's that mean for a good plot? Or the plot lives, the plot breathes, the plot is its own character. These are all things we hear. And here's what I'm going to say. The plot is your pacing, and that's why the plot is important. To make it feel natural and smooth, not contrived and chunky and predictable, as we see in so many movies nowadays, especially formulaic movies. There is nothing more delightful than getting a good heaping scoopful of a formula movie that surprises you.
Yes.
That is... Tara looks so doubtful like that ever happens, but it does.
I'm trying to think of one.
A lot of the Marvel movies did pretty damn well with it.
Yes.
So, yeah, they were definitely formulaic, and I will argue that all day long. They were formulaic, but they were so well put together and so well told, you forgot it was a formula and just enjoyed a piece of really good entertainment. And that's what I'm going to say. Plot is for pacing, and pacing is something built into human psychology over 10 to 40,000 years of society and civilization. We expect during a story for there to be a break, a down point here, a high point there, etc. No matter what kind of story that is, anywhere from romance to action to nonfiction. So, Robert, do you want to jump in after this? What makes a good plot? Or are you talking about plot thickens? Or Robert loves this phrase, the plot thinks. Go ahead, Robert.
I don't like that phrase. I don't like that phrase, the plot thinks, but we're not going to get into that. I think the author thinks, and the author should think of a good plot. So I find, I'll speak as a reader here, that I want a story that I can make guesses about what's coming next and then find out if I'm right or not. And I'd like being surprised in a story as long as it makes sense. So to me, a good plot. One of my favorite series right now is the Expanse series of books.
Oh, are you reading them?
I am reading them.
I've read them all. I'm waiting for book 9 to come out this year.
So I don't know what book I'm on, but they are great books. And I didn't think I was going to like them. I got into them on a recommendation from a friend, but they have incredible plots. Stuff happens that makes total sense in the story and the world, but I am constantly surprised by what's happening.
And by the way, they're one of those authors. They lay out this gem of one sentence that gives you so much insight and just kind of explodes your perception of that moment, that character, that interaction, or whatever. Yeah. Sorry, Robert. Love good writing.
Right. It's excellent writing. And so for me, I think a good plot is one that it moves you through the story, that you take a journey with the character that is believable, that you can understand, but still has the ability to surprise you and to move you.
Tara?
How do you do that?
Oh, sorry.
You just got to practice. You just got to write.
You know, that's actually worth saying every episode all the time. I like to coin the phrase, or other people have coined the phrase that I repeat: learn the rules, follow the rules, break the rules. You got to practice.
Yeah.
And you've got to look at how other people do it. In other words, if you're going to write, how do you get better? You'll write and read. Okay, Tara, plot.
Okay, first, I apologize if I repeat something that Robert said, because my laptop went white on me and I panicked because I'm the one that started the call. Luckily, it came back and it looks like you guys just kept on going. So I apologize if I'm a little repetitive of what Robert said. But if we go back to the way I define plot at the beginning, which is a series of events, start at the beginning of the story, I said the book, and go through to the end. You have a series of events, and this is the plot. Some of those, the plot, these events always advance the story, what you're trying to get to. They're not all bad things. They're not all bad events. They're not all detrimental to the main character. They're not all good things either, which is where you get into pacing, is you need a balance between the character succeeds, has a fallback. Succeeds, has a fallback. Has a big fallback. Succeed. And if you go in, and you can go do a search for beat sheets and find different beat sheets for the genre that you're writing, it will tell you in general what it should be. Use it as a guideline. But your plot, which are those events, are advancing your character towards the resolution at the end. And that's when you talk about side stories, side arcs, side plots, whatever you want to call them. Those are other things. Sometimes they advance the major plot. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes that's one of the big things that's getting in the way.
Sometimes.
Depends on the genre you're writing and the story you're writing.
Sometimes they still advance the story because they advance the character in their personal story. They build that character. This is where that we teased Tara earlier where she says there's only one plot, and we mentioned B plots. I don't do a lot of romance, but I definitely want that character arc in there. And this also balances those exciting scenes with introspective moments where they go into the character's head. But still, you can't just have them thinking about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches unless if later that's going to come into play and be important to the story. Whatever they're introspecting about.
Yes.
Yeah. It has to be important to the story. By the way, flipping back to singing the praises of authors we appreciate, Corey there, that Robert is reading with the Expanse story, oh my God, this is an author I have stared and studied at how they do character introspection. Yes? What?
It's two authors.
It said authors.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, they are. It's a pen
one
name.
name on the cover.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't think I said authors. I think they. I said they. Because James S.A. Corey is actually 2 authors and blah blah blah. But the point is, they write inside the character's head. You'll have 1 line of dialogue. You'll have 4 paragraphs of introspective thought. Another line of dialogue. But it doesn't break the story, and it does move it forward. It moves it forward on a very personal level, so you connect to that character. And
yeah. So I remember, and I don't know if they'd still teach this in school, but when I was first taught plot and writing, and you go through all the different parts of the plot, the climax, the denouement, all of these terms, but it was a roller coaster.
Yes,
they drew a roller coaster on the board, and I don't know if they still teach it like that, but that's important.
A tent.
That you're
a circus tent.
They teach it like a tent.
A circus tent. You have your midpoint, which is your highest pole in the tent, and then you have 2 other poles, which is your end of Act 1, beginning of Act 3, and then you have your beginning and end, which is your outside poles. I've seen it drawn as a circus tent. And you're just, going up. And up. Right.
The point is, you have ups and downs, but you're always moving. Even if you have flashbacks, those are driving the story.
Right. Okay, so did we get enough out to call it done and do a wrap-up, or has anybody got anything they're hot for before we head for that?
I think we can hit final thoughts.
Tara, shall we start with you, please?
Pardon?
May we start with you, please? Wrap-up, final thoughts, recap, or say some stuff.
Even pantsers need to think about plot. You got to know where you're going at some point, or you never finish your book. You never finish the story.
Robert?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree on this one. I always, I know the I'm gonna hit. I know how the story ends when I start writing the story. I may not outline it, but I know how this story is gonna end, and I want to see where the characters go in the journey along the way. So however you get there, know that your plot is important and sit down and write your friggin' book.
Let's see, I guess if I got to do a recap, find your style and realize it doesn't come the first book the first time. And it's okay to change it, whether it's because you've grown and changed yourself, or whether because you're writing a different kind of book, or you just, whatever reason, it's okay to change it. Okay, other than that, let's get ready and get out of here. Don't forget, you can email us at writenightshow@gmail.com. That's right with a W, night with an N, show@gmail.com. Give us your thoughts and feedback on this episode, or let us know what other episodes you'd like to hear. I think we've got 3 new episodes already written down in my notes over the past little bit. Other than that, I want to thank everybody for supporting us by downloading and sharing the podcast on your favorite social media, as well as everybody who shows up in the live and interactive tavern on twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk. Thank you guys for all your subs, follows, bits, and all the things you do. Super appreciated. Let's give Cogsley the stage, get out of here, and we'll catch you on the next Right Night.
Thank you for joining author Travis I. Sivart and the other writers, content creators, and all-around amazing people for our discussion here on Right. Join us again soon, and until you do, make sure you create with passion, enjoy the journey, and remember, every night can be right night.
With MailChimp, you get a whole lot more than a URL. You get an all-in-one marketing platform to help drive sales. That means you can connect your data to make more informed, smarter decisions. And you get powerful automation tools like our Customer Journey Builder to ensure you never miss an opportunity to turn shoppers into loyal customers. So if you're ready to integrate your marketing and boost sales, get started today at MailChimp.com/smartmarketing. MailChimp, built for growing businesses.